Mountaineering in Colorado was very much a man's sport, and women just didn't do those type of things.
Gudy started building the Colorado Trail in the mid-70s and did complete the trail by 1988.
It's her persistence, her commitment to an idea made something worthwhile happen.
Gudy's great legacy is her ability to have people look at nature through her wonderful eyes of a child.
As strong and enduring as the Rocky Mountains they stood beside, as visionary as the views of the Grand Plains they looked across, the women inducted into the Colorado Women's Hall of Fame are trailblazers whose work has improved and enriched our lives. They are teachers, scientists, ranchers, leaders in business, education, religion, and the arts. Women who have been recognized for their many contributions to our state, our country, and the world. I'm Renelda Muse, and these are the stories of great Colorado women.
Well, my mom was definitely a one-of-a-kind, unique mom in a lot of different ways.
She's a Pied Piper. She's a Mary Poppins. She's a Sound of Music Maria, all rolled into one.
Gudy should go down in history as the founder of the Colorado Trail.
And I thought this would be a great idea to have a cross-country trail in the state of Colorado.
She organized for years the trail crews.
We built pretty close to 480 miles of trail over the last 40-some years.
She was a breaker of barriers and a beholder of beauty.
I think she must have been a Mother Teresa of the Colorado Trail because she convinced people of the worthwhile purpose of it.
She just had this personality that you just enjoyed being around her.
You felt like you were the only person when you were around her, like she was very engaged in what you were doing or what you were saying.
She was always happy. She was always smiling.
She grew up with coming out to Rocky Mountain National Park in the summers with her dad, who worked for the Forest Service. They lived in Illinois, and she would come out and spend summers in the park.
So she got an early taste of the outdoors through her father.
My grandfather, Paul Timmerhouse, was a difficult man. The way I think he treated women, and in particular my grandmother, which would be her mom, Elsa, she was never allowed to drive. He was very controlling. And she used to tell me she would try to encourage her to leave him and speak up, in her behalf. And she was taken down to the coal cellar and beaten. She had a very tough childhood. That definitely had an impact on her tenacity and her choice to look at things positive, because she could have gone down a different route. She had a twin sister, Aunt Ingeborg definitely took a different route. She was very negative. So I think it was a choice she made, that she was not going to live that way and she was not going to be told what to do or be a second-class citizen.
They had their son, Klaus, and it's vital to their educational situation that they send their son to college. And I suppose they were in dire financial straits to get this done, and there wasn't much money left for the girls. And Western State College had the lowest possible tuition rates.
My parents met when they were in Western State College in Gunnison, and they met going in the backcountry. Some of their trips are just amazing, the things they did.
They were fortunate to find each other.
Her major in college was recreation, so she had to recreate.
She was a child of the mountains there. She instilled that love of the mountains in her children, her grandchildren.
You never knew what was coming up until a week would come up and we're going off to the mountains. And we would go camping someplace, we'd go river rafting someplace. Always had some exciting things to look forward to.
You know, we were the house where all my friends wanted to come to.
When we were kids, she was always having us do little artist things on weekends.
She would have things like treasure hunts, you know, where she'd put clues and questions around the area where we lived, and you'd go and figure things out.
She was always busy, always busy.
Gudy had started the Lookout Mountain Recreation Association.
That was a group that was dedicated to providing recreational activities for kids.
She just organized everything.
Camping and hiking.
And baseball teams and swimming.
Still to this day, I have friends from grade school, you know, that tell me how she impacted their lives, you know, with the nature and mountains and skiing.
Gudy just attracts people like honey attracts bees.
She was always pulling people in.
She would thank people for everything they did.
She would recognize like how that person was unique.
And she wouldn't thank them just like a thank you. She would do a little painting, or she would make a little pottery.
And she'd write a poem.
Or she'd create a little, gift of something and give this to people for their effort, their volunteer effort in doing these things.
The impact, you know, talking to people over the years, you know, they still treasure those little mementos, you know, that were gifts that she gave to them.
And, you know, people just thought that was great, that something they wanted to do, and she thought so highly of them that she would give them something afterwards, something that she had handmade.
I have a number of her various artistic endeavors. Her painting, watercolor primarily, is beautiful.
Gudy was a prolific artist.
All in her travels, she always had her little sketchbook, and she would have this little packet of watercolors and a pencil.
We would go on a hike, and we'd be hiking along, and we'd stop for a little break.
And she'd just plop down and just start, you know, sketching.
She'd already painted a little painting in the time that we'd taken the break. And then she would take that little painting and she'd put it in her pack and maybe get a couple more during the day.
She would always give them away.
And that would be one of the many gifts that she might give to people for volunteering or helping out, or just because, you know, they've stopped and visited.
You could stop in at her house at any time.
She didn't spend a lot of time getting ready for a guest. You were just part of her household when you walked in the door.
All her activities were fundraising for others. And at some point I suggested that maybe she ought to get a real job with real responsibilities. And she took me seriously.
And she started her own real estate company back when women didn't open up their own business.
And she operated up on Lookout Mountain for, I think, about 10 years.
And someone told me that they saw her as a community builder. As she was a real estate agent, she was trying to build a community at the same time.
She was always game for whatever.
She had been leading all these mountaineering trips over to Europe and different parts of the world.
She led at least 3 trips, probably more, to the Alps.
I don't think I ever saw a challenge that Gudy didn't feel like she could address.
Here was a woman who could take care of herself.
All these things she did, I mean, some of them scared me.
I could never keep up with her. She was always 2 steps ahead of you.
She took me up these things, these steep ice couloirs with crampons and ice axes, and I learned I could do that.
Her hiking program, when I first joined her, was with the Colorado Mountain Club, and it was a trekking program. We would take a group of people out for a week at a time.
And she led a Colorado Mountain Club trip to Everest Base Camp.
It was a long, strenuous, we got up to 18.2 or 3 on a place called Kalapatar, where you get a magnificent view of Everest.
You know, it's just like she never stopped. She didn't just do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. She did a lot of this and a lot of that.
She entered a men's ski race illegally.
Mountaineering in Colorado was very much a man's sport, and women just didn't do those type of things.
And she dressed up as a man and came out 2nd or 3rd, something like that.
She's always been willing to kind of push that edge. I would say that in terms of helping her kids and grandkids. She's always realized that the girls might have a disadvantage, and she's made sure that they've had the same opportunities that we've all had.
She would meet any challenge and say, there's no challenge too great that you can't overcome if you really become bold and do not believe the answer no.
Gudy became the first female president of the Colorado Mountain Club. So for her to become the first woman president created a lot of controversy. And I've talked to some of the past presidents, at the time, and there's a lot of people who said she deserves it more than anyone else. And other ones you said, but we can't do this. And she proved them all wrong, that she was a great president and got a lot of things done. It wasn't until later that I realized that it was a big deal.
Everything fascinated her when she was outdoors, and she would notice everything.
The ability to be in the moment, it was just such a joy to be around.
She was the best traveling companion. I remember she took off her hiking boot, and she had had an operation on her second toe, and it hadn't gone well, and her toe was stiff. And so she had to tape it down to be able to get it into her shoe. She was hiking across England with this toe taped down so she could fit into her boots.
She didn't let things fluster her. She knew how to roll with the punches. One time she was hiking in the Alps with about 15 people, and a lady hung behind in their group, and an avalanche came down and killed this woman. Gudy could be in a situation like that and not fall apart. She wasn't easily rattled.
There was no stopping her. If she got an idea, she carried it out, and that was the way she was. She was a force of nature.
We've hiked New Zealand, Austria, Switzerland, Germany, all over Colorado, climbed all the 14ers. It was just an adventure.
She climbed the highest peaks in Czechoslovakia. She climbed in Ecuador, one of those big volcanoes. Oh, and then she climbed the 2 highest peaks in Africa.
Gudy and I we just had some wonderful, wonderful times. And we traveled all over the world together. We did the Karakoram Highway, which is the highest road in the world, from Islamabad in Pakistan to Kashgar in China. She
just took everything in stride.
If somebody had annoyed her, she wasn't quick to talk about it. I admire that.
She handled every occasion with style and grace and good taste.
There's so many great stories of things she has done. You go, wow, that's just amazing she did that.
You will go to her house and the front door is carved by Gudy.
Our old door was not a very attractive door, just a plain, solid door. And she decided we're gonna carve panels of all the different things we do as a family. That front door still has the panels to this day. Not only did she do carving, but she got very much into pottery, and she did pottery until she died.
But they always had some flaw in them, but that was certainly what led to my joy of having them. I enjoyed the fact that her stuff wasn't perfect, but her painting was. It was beautiful.
It's like she could do multiple things at once, and she always thrived on doing that type of stuff. How did Gudy have time to do all the things she did? She never stopped. She was an early riser, and she was always the last one to bed.
She was just a strong individual, and she just did everything well.
She was a tall lady, physically.
6 foot tall.
And mentally, she was 12 feet tall.
She did things in quantity and constantly active, doing things all the time.
The Colorado Trail, that would never have been built without her.
It was kind of envisioned by a couple of folks, one who was a forest ranger here in the state, and one who was an editor of the Horseman's Magazine. And they had been to Switzerland and had seen the trail systems there.
And they thought this would be a great idea to have a cross-country trail in the state of Colorado.
Gudy was the chairman of the Huts and Trails Committee of the Colorado Mountain Club.
And that's how she got involved with the Colorado Trail. It was kind of a statewide effort to create this trail through Colorado.
But they dropped the ball.
She was on the committee and they were trying to get something done, and she got frustrated that it was almost too committee-fied. They essentially disbanded or ran out of their funding. She said, I'm going to take this on myself.
And she became the main person doing the work.
It's like her full-time career. But it didn't end. It went on through weekends, it went on through the summers. We were at our house, and she brought up all of these maps of the entire state of Colorado, USGS maps. Our entire floor was covered, and we're going to identify where the Colorado Trail should go or what the different routes could be.
To look at the length of Colorado from Denver to Durango, basically, to identify the trails that existed and to start figuring out how to connect them.
Boy, I was hooked on that idea. I thought that was the greatest thing that Colorado could do. The thought of Colorado having this was so terrific.
And it got up into the 80s and things just weren't going well, and there occurred an article in the Rocky Mountain News called The Trail to Nowhere.
It was difficult, and just to be honest with you, it was a man's world in the forest. It was not a woman's world.
When Gudy first started out building the trail, she really didn't talk to the Forest Service much. She just went out in the mountains and started digging.
And for women to say, we're going to put a tread on your trail, on your land, particularly in forest districts, was unknown, unheard of.
Well, as time went on, the Forest Service caught on to that and decided that wasn't the way it was supposed to be. They were supposed to work with Gudy and with us.
Dealing with the different Forest Service regulations and rules, mapping it out, getting agreement, that was difficult for her.
Well, at that point, then Governor Dick Lamb kind of got involved. She got some grants that helped pay for some of the early design work.
That's when she started organizing the volunteers, getting additional volunteer funding.
And through her guidance, encouraged large numbers of volunteers.
When it came to all these volunteers, they were infected by her enthusiasm.
She not only led with determination and vision and creativity, but she led with her heart. And when someone leads with their heart, you know they're going to the right place.
I just remember that you did all these things that she wanted you to do. You didn't think about that she told you to do it. She just created the energy and set it up so you were ready to do it.
First thing when I met her, she wanted to get me involved in things. Before I knew it, I was laying out new trails for the Gunnison Spur.
She kind of created it and put you in the right position, and you did it, and you had a great time doing it. She was so passionate and excited about it that she would explain what people could get out of this and what the benefits were to them.
Gudy put in hard sweat labor in building that trail. And when others saw that she was working right beside them, shoulder to shoulder, that got them excited. Look, they said, Gudy Gaskill is working here.
Gudy had very large numbers of crews for several summers.
When we'd get done trail work, she'd always have a big dinner for us.
I cooked for the group, I managed the camp, I welcomed people, I cleaned up the fireplaces.
She spent countless hours with the Forest Service, mapping, planning.
We can only build a trail at 6% grade, not any more than that, so that families can take their kids and not say, oh, how much further is it?
Everything that we do in building the trail is by hand, basically. We go out and we dig in the dirt.
She went out with Pulaski's, which is a pick and a digging tool, and literally built the trail.
We try to make it so that the drainage works well and the water won't tear up our trail after we build it.
A lot of people signed up for her cruise, and you'd go out for a week.
Gudy was funny. As a trail builder and someone who was the beginning of 400 miles of trail in the mountains of Colorado, Gudy didn't read maps well.
One time she went past our camp and had to backtrack.
She got lost on the trail. The good thing about her was her mind generally led her to the right place, even though it might have taken her a while to get there.
She'd lead a trek, and I can't imagine how she got lost, but she would.
I was with her on a trek one time, and she was leading the group that day. My job was to go up with the truck and meet them at the end of that particular segment of the trail. She had hiked along and come to a place where there's a T intersection with the trail, and the sign there had been turned 90 degrees and pointed the wrong way. Gudy looked at the sign and headed off down the trail. Well, it was the wrong way. Probably an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and I decided, well, this doesn't make sense. I'd better get back out of here. It was dark by the time I got back to camp, and deciding whether or not to call the sheriff and look for some help. Well, about the time we were getting ready to do that, here comes this old clunky truck bouncing into camp. And here's Gudy and the whole crew in the back of this truck. They had run onto this logger down in an area of acting logging. Gudy had flagged them down, and we were talking to her about it. Oh, don't you ever worry about me. I'll get here. We'll find our way back, always.
It was always a little bit disorganized, but she always pulled it off.
We built pretty close to 480 miles of trail over the last 40-some years. Had a walkthrough of the trail and some golden spike ceremonies, and declared the Colorado Trail complete.
When we finished it in 83, 84, I led the first group of people on a through hike. It took us 6 weeks.
Gudy's been there with us all along, and certainly is now with us in spirit.
Gudy's Rest is just a log about half a dozen miles or so out of Durango at the end of the trail with a nice view. If you wanted to take a break or rest, just a place to sit down and meditate.
The Colorado Trail has 5 words that signify what we are. And those words are, it's a recreation, educational, family-type trail.
The trail was a way for people to really get to love nature.
Because there's so many cascade waterfalls and beautiful rock cliffs, and every bend in the trail is another incredible view.
And my mom always would get up earlier than everyone else and go for a hike. And so that morning, I was up early, and she invited me to go with her. And, it's just the quiet of walking up there, and the sounds of the river birds and the water. And I just remember getting on top of this rock. And it was just one of those mornings with beautiful sunrise, with all the roses and vermilions and colors. And then the river below, with just the way the light hits it, and it's just dancing and sparkling in the sun. It's just magic, and the sound of the birds. And she just sat there, and her eyes were closed, and I have a vivid memory of this. And there were tears running down her cheeks, and I knew what that meant, just the joy of being in the moment and nature and just soaking up that. And she kind of opened her eyes and looked at me and smiled. And it was not a word. We didn't talk, or there wasn't, philosophical talk, but it was just that sharing of the moment and of her love of nature. And it's a very vivid memory I have, that everything was all right with the world.
What I loved about this woman was her vivacity. She was so full of life.
So I think in my 20s, I realized how amazing she was in the things that she could get done. When she started getting these recognitions from President Bush and President Reagan.
President George Bush Sr. had his 1,000 points of light. Gudy was chosen as one of those points of light. And I was so pleased and happy for her to go to the White House and receive that award.
You realize that, wow, she's really doing more than the average person, that she's not just my mom, she's actually making a big impact to the world.
Just basically set her mind to something, and regardless, whether it was arts or crafts or pottery, or she just learned how to do it.
Her greatest accomplishment, I think without doubt, the Colorado Trail.
It's the best kept secret, inexpensive vacation you could possibly have.
The Colorado Trail, that would never have been built without her.
Colorado was fortunate to find Gudy. Gudy was fortunate to find Colorado.
Gudy's great legacy is her ability to have people look at nature through her wonderful eyes of a child.
Her heart and soul were in Colorado, in the mountains, in the rivers, and in the whole atmosphere of Colorado.
I've never traveled with anybody that easily as I did with Gudy Gaskill. I miss her.
I just love Gudy for who she is.
The energy was always there for life and for living.
She was the best possible example when it came to integrity, philosophy, you name it, all the good things. She was one of the good ones.
It's her persistence, her commitment to an idea made something worthwhile happen. And that's how a legacy gets built.